I like to be talking while the screen's still black. Before we get started, I'd like to point out that today's video is not sponsored by Summit or O'Reilly or Brake Best or PowerStop, but it could be. We're going to be installing the front and rear brakes on the F100 this week, and kind of wanted to go over some of the parts that we're going to be using. This is the PowerStop Z23 Evolution kit. I bought it from Summit. It's offered through a lot of retailers online. This should be perfect for our application. It's more for spirited street driving, just an upgrade over stock. The rotors are slotted and drilled. So one of the things I wanted to point out that I think is pretty cool is that the rotors are actually designated left and right side. So what a lot of manufacturers do, which you see this with wheels more often, and it kind of annoys me, if you have a directional wheel, they should be a left and a right, so the direction is the same no matter which side of the car you're facing. So pay attention if you see directional wheels. I'll bet when you look at the car from the other side, they'll be angled the other way. The calipers, yes, they are red. That wasn't my choice, but that's how they come. These are the exact same casting numbers as the Ford Crown Victoria calipers. So basically, they're just a factory refurbished caliper that's been, I hope, powder coated red and not just painted, but it looks like powder coat to me. Nice hardware, freshly greased, new pistons, so should be good there. It does come with new clips and new banjo washers for your brake line fitting. We also do have new brake lines that we bought from Summit a while back while we were there. And on the rear, it's mostly O'Reilly stuff. It's all Brake Best, replacement drums, hardware kit, wheel cylinders, and shoes. So all the parts will be new. One thing that I want to clear up, people seem to believe that rear discs would improve the braking dramatically of your truck, and honestly it's just not true, especially for street driving. If you'll notice, even the major manufacturers like Chevrolet still had drum rear brakes in the late 2000s, 2010s on a lot of their half-ton pickup trucks because they work just fine for what trucks do for a living. See, a lot of people will spend the $500 or $600 or whatever it costs to do a rear disc conversion from drums. And the honest YouTubers and people who have done it will say they don't really notice that much of a difference. Now, if you're taking it out to track day and doing autocross or road courses, you'll probably recognize a little more consistent braking even after they get a lot of temperature in them after several laps. But it's not going to be doing that with this truck, and honestly, less than 1% of the people are going to be doing that with any of their vehicles. I do fully admit four-wheel disc brakes do look way cooler. If you're gonna run like a steely type wheel or a solid dish, which that's kind of the plan here, you're not gonna see the brakes anyway. So with the brake pad kit, PowerStop sends you, of course, they're pads that have some special backing or whatever for anti-squealing. They send you the clips, they send you this silicone brake lubricant, they send you these boots and the rubber kit, which is already in our calipers. You get clips with the calipers as well. One thing that's kind of nice, they provide you instructions with braking in your brakes, which is pretty aggravating if you spend a bunch of money installing new brakes on your car and then they squeal from day one, because there's a chance that you just improperly broke them in. Another thing I wanted to point out that I liked about these rotors, they're actually zinc plated. You shouldn't have that issue where the center of it becomes all rusty and looking awful, especially behind your wheels. If you got really flashy wheels, sometimes that's the only reason you want these drilled and slotted rotors, is because they look cool. One of the great things about disc brakes is how simple they are, which we will learn quickly that the rear brakes are not so simple when you go to installing a bunch of springs and clips and etc. After you slide the bracket off the caliper, you can install these spring clips, basically what keeps your brake pads kind of where they're supposed to be. Since our calipers are new, they of course already have grease on the slide pins and inside these boots. But we're going to need to apply grease inside these retaining clips So the brake shoes can move a little bit inside there, and it also kind of keep that squealing down. And according to the instructions on the back side of this package, it says to lubricate the back sides of both brake pads. It's something I just have a hard time doing because it's just a big grease and goop wad that attracts a bunch of dust. So if I have issues with squealing brakes, I may revisit it, but typically I'm just going to put it inside these clips so the brakes can move freely. Slide these on the pins. And you'll notice the arch is going to go to the outside edge of the caliper. Actually, we'll probably drop the inside one in there first. Now, we have our factory bolts handy, because it's about the only thing that we're going to reuse from the factory brakes. So you want to make sure you're using the caliper that the bleeder screw is at the highest point when installed. Snug those up with an 18mm. Alright, we don't have any interference with our dust shield or the brake shoes. Now we can bolt on our brake line. If we're being honest, it doesn't exactly thrill me that we're reusing this banjo bolt from the old calipers, but it was easy to tell that it's cleared out. Just figure for what we've spent on this kit, I'm not sure how much harder it would have been for them to just throw this in. I've got new crush washers. They're brass, so they're softer than the bolts, so they will compress, and they build in these ribs into the face of the caliper as well as to the face of your brake line, so those will bite into those washers and create a really good seal to keep the brake fluid from leaking out under pressure. Based on this little half circle cut, that tells us which side that our bolt's going to go, because it relieves it for like a socket. I'm going to put the washer on this side of that banjo bolt, so this will be our driver's side brake line. So now we'll knock the other side out, and then we'll move to the back. Alright, so we slotted the brake drum to fit the new 5x4.5 bolt pattern, and no, that's not a problem, because these drums and the rotors up front actually find center on the hub. The lugs don't really affect anything as far as centering up and its concentricity, so don't sweat that. Just bolt the wheel in there and it pins it in place, and it can't really move much. So it does its braking job just fine. This is the hub that we had machined and new studs installed to this bolt pattern. The other one didn't turn out so well, so I ordered a new one. It'll probably be here next week. But I wanted to go ahead and at least get this one on and have the fronts done, so all we lack is that one rear, and we don't need to film that. So next step, I'm going to install new wheel cylinders on this assembly, then put a drive shaft in this side, put the suspension back together, and then we can start building the rear brake. Well, it is obvious now that I put the spindle on the left side instead of the right side based on how this brake cable needs to be mounted to the frame. Oh well. Alright, so we're back in business. Now, we've got a couple of these brake kits, one for each side, and I noticed all that's in them are the springs and the keeper nuts, which, well, I do see one horseshoe clip, but it does not have an adjustment. So lucky for us, we kept all the old parts just in case we needed anything. It's also kind of nice to reference to see which side, you know, the parts are supposed to go on here. We're not going to be using the parking brake, so we can leave that out, but we will need to install this adjuster assembly in here so we can get the brakes tensioned properly to where they activate when you press the pedal. So I'm going to lay these out. The good news about the brake shoes is there's 4 of them, and all 4 of them are exactly the same. So you just grab 2 pieces out of the box for each side, and they're mirror images of each other, so you don't have to sweat it too bad. You're going to need one that has this pin that holds this side of the adjuster. Alright. Now we can slide our drum on here. What we're looking for is just see what kind of clearance we have over these brake shoes, then we can adjust them out to where they're just clearing. So we'll just have to do that statically as we're sliding that drum off and on. It's tough to tell, but from the surface of this drum, we've only got less, I don't know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch clearance there. So I think we'll start there. Get this truck on the road, we notice that there's not much rear brake. We can make adjustments later, but I'm pretty sure that's going to be taken up easily with just pressure in that master cylinder, since it's pretty well fully compressed. Our other rear wheel hub came in, but the outer diameter was a little too thick for it to fit inside the brake drum, so we took and had it machined down to match what the stock OD is. Then brought it home, got it pressed into that spindle, and installed this last brake assembly. But the brakes are complete. I did find a happy spot to mount all of the brake lines, and I do have a cap over that so no dust and stuff can get inside. The fronts are finished up as you saw earlier, and I did find a good place to mount those and tested the front wheel angle and travel to make sure that we weren't going to overextend those brake lines. Also got the front anti-sway bar all mounted up since we've got everything else complete. And that's pretty nice. It's easy to locate. There's plenty of room to get those fastened in there and not interfere with any of these cross member. So the chassis is basically finished. Just need to now start working on where the cab's going to sit, where the engine's going to sit, then we can start working on brakes in the cab. Lead time on parts is really what's going to make our next decisions. We were supposed to have Terminator X from Holley by now, but we don't, and we won't have an intake for some time, which isn't the end of the world. We can still start it with the stock intake, but we will need that controller and harness. Got a text from the upholsterer today just confirming a couple of the decisions that we had made, so it sounds like that's happening. Look forward to seeing those seats. although they're not going to do us much good at this point, but it's something we needed installed before we can start setting column and brake pedal, etc., which we may end up doing that before the powertrain. But what we can do is start stripping this guy down, pulling the harness, cleaning it up, taking the accessories off of it, painting the block, and I may go ahead and just order the cam and all the parts that's going to go along with that swap. Gaskets, of course, springs, push rods. We're going to do the trunnion upgrade, timing gears and chain will be upgraded. Basically just kind of the easy stuff to do, and you might as well do it while you're in there. So we can get that engine going. As far as the mechanical side of it, we'll just be waiting on the Terminator X to start it. So that can be kind of maybe the next couple of videos, hopefully, but we'll basically be dependent upon what ships to us. So until next time, that's it and that's all. Thanks for watching, y'all.